Welcome to Open Container. I'm Doug Schnitzbahn. I'm a journalist, writer, and overall lover of the outdoors. I've fought wildfires, reported on national politics, published magazines, and I once ate an apricot from a tree next to Percy Shelley's grave. Some of the most powerful experiences in my life have happened in the Utah desert. I've been lost. I've done dumb shit on exposed cliffs. I've seen oceans of stars and had the best sleep of my life. Out here, you see the world in a new way. There are new perspectives in the deep canyons. There are hidden microcosms, pools of water and maple trees, yards from bare, oven-hot rocks. There are the stories of the people who lived here for millennia, written on the rock. This is one of the few places where you can truly get lost, and I find it essential for creativity. We live in a world that's becoming more and more boxed in. We are defined by algorithms, by our technology, by a common language in English that's spoken throughout the world. If we want to continue being creative as people and as a species, we need to find ways and expressions outside of these limitations. The desert can give us this, in the gnarled bark of a juniper tree, in the silence of a hidden pool. Out here, our experiences allow us to reset our brain and rethink. After all, isn't this why we go outside? To find a new way to think, a new way to be? This is what art gives us, too. I recently worked on a project writing a guidebook for the town of Green Mountain Falls, near Colorado Springs on the side of Pikes Peak. It's a very small town that has embraced installation art. Here you can find incredible sculptures, such as Earth Speaks, a land-based art project grounded in healing and belonging by Osage artist Brooke Smiley. This art piece simply consists of benches in the shape of a bear's paw that embrace the surrounding cottonwoods and the burbling creek. This installation was created in conjunction with the Ute tribe of Colorado, the only indigenous people with reservation lands in a state which at least 48 tribes have historically called home. It is a powerful reminder that this land is deeper than what we want it to be. It's an important connection to the indigenous people who are still here and still know this land better. It's a necessary reminder, but certainly not strident or in your face. You simply sit on the benches and feel the land, the sound of the cottonwood leaves, the sound of the creek. Perhaps how it was meant to be. The art here is being here, in the spot, and knowing its significance. That's an extremely important reminder for us, not just culturally, but personally as well. As society becomes more enthralled with technology, as we inhabit more spaces, it is crucial for us to be able to find renewal in the land. Art that comes out of the land will become more and more important as the noise around us becomes more deafening. It's not all seriousness either. There's joy, there's fun outdoors. We can thrill ourselves to watch a red-tailed hawk fly. We can touch trees, feel that juniper bark. We can lie down naked in the canyons against the warm sandstone. This is art. Simply being out here, experiencing it. My guest today is someone who understands the importance of art, especially art that comes from nature. Artist Cody Chamberlain spent his childhood roaming the high west desert of Utah, where he developed a lifelong concern and respect for the environment. He began working as a forest ranger when he was just 18 years old, later earning his BFA in Art and Visual Communications at Utah Valley University. He holds graduate degrees in anthropology and archaeology from the University of Utah. After completing his undergraduate degree, he scored one of the most distinguished exhibitions in Utah as the first of his career. He recently completed a large-scale oil painting commission for the state of Utah, who also purchased the image rights for his previous large-scale work. His work represents a new breed of artists finding inspiration in Utah's deserts, forests, and mountains. So let's open the container with Cody Chamberlain. Welcome to Open Container. And our guest today is Cody Chamberlain, who is an artist, an explorer, and a lover of the desert. Welcome, Cody. And to get started, why don't you tell us a bit about how you got on the path to become a professional artist?
Hi, Doug. Yeah, thanks for having me. How I got on the path. Well, I was born that way. I've always had a passion for drawing. It's kind of well known in the family that as soon as I could pick up an implement to draw with, I started decorating the walls and the carpet and everything else. So yeah, and then I always drew or painted, and I had supplies to do that. My mother always made sure to keep me, in coloring books and stuff like that. So it was fostered at an early age. And it was always there no matter what I was doing in my life, formative years, growing up, different jobs, different that, different this. I never really thought it was an actual possibility to become, I knew there was artists out there, but you never think, well, at least I didn't, well, I'm going to go for this. But it's like convergent evolution as my life was going, and I wouldn't let this thing go. And then I ended up getting into getting my bachelor's of fine arts, going to college for it, and that kind of steered me a little more towards it. But even still going through college, I thought it would be like maybe something that could fortify another degree or a career move, and that wouldn't end up being my end goal. But it was always there, and it eventually encompassed everything else I was doing until I realized this is what I'm doing. This is what I've been doing. I've never stopped doing it, and this is, the direction I'm going. And here I am.
And you grew
I
up
guess.
yeah. And you grew up in Utah, right?
Yeah.
And where in Utah did you grow up?
Primarily, I grew up with my grandparents in a very small town. And this is my test for people that are from Utah. When I say small town, they're like, tell me, I'll know where it is. Cedar Fort, Utah. And more than half the time they're like, huh? I haven't heard of that one. It's because for the most part, it's a row of mailboxes along a lonely highway out in the West Desert. But, it's a little bit bigger now. But yeah, so I grew up, it's way out in the sage in a really cool, like grandparents had an awesome house out in the desert. I could run right out into the fields and go exploring right at an early age. So it was a really great place. And then, Utah County as well. So kind of right here in the heart of Utah.
Sure. Yeah. And you also worked for the
homegrown. So pardon the accent.
Well, and you worked for the Forest Service for a while too, right? In Utah? Or?
I still work for the Forest Service.
You still do? Okay.
So yeah, when I was talking about like all things kind of coming together to point me in this artistic direction, I still have it's not a day job, it's a career. And I've had it for over 20 years now. And that allows me to have great insurance. Health coverage is becoming more and more important as I get older, and retirement, which is something that, a lot of artists, it's so scary to think about running your own business and trying to figure out all these life challenges and stuff for later on. And it's been extremely like convenient for me to keep that all organized with the Forest Service just on a logistical like basis, let alone the Forest Service keeping me patrolling the Wasatch Front all over the mountains and learning how people interact with the environment over the past 20 years and being out there all the time.
So what's your title then for the Forest?
I'm a volunteer coordinator for the Forest Service. So I get a really cool job of like managing and coordinating with all these proactive people and different groups and organizations that want to go out and do something good for like public lands. And I get to mix and mingle with them. So it's like the best of the best, the people are going out there. And it's a really busy forest right here along the Wasatch Front. So it's a flow of thousands of people really that want to get out there and interact with it. But I've done a little of everything. Hey, it's been a long career. It's everything from scrubbing restrooms to building trail, working on fires. Like,
oh yeah.
I say this one thing that I'm primarily doing now, which, and it also involves a lot of office time too. But, it's like most agencies, especially government agencies, it's underfunded. Right. So everybody has to kind of mix and mingle and do a wide range of things.
Yeah. I've been there. I worked for the Forest Service and
I
cleaned a lot of outhouses, moved outhouses.
Yeah, I was like, he's going to key in on that. He knows all about that. Yeah.
I remember the outhouses. Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
You
and
can't forget them.
there's I think there's been a lot of talk that the Forest Service is no longer hiring seasonal employees. So I'd assume
Yeah,
that makes the work you're doing with volunteers even more important, right? Because a lot of that
it,
seasonal work is now volunteer work.
bingo, exactly. More and more, and you know what? Even okay, so that's for this fiscal year. I'm sure that's going to change. That's for whatever reasons way beyond my control or knowledge that the budget was this or that, and there's not going to be any hiring of seasonal uh, positions this season. But I'm sure that's going to change because we rely heavily on obviously the seasonal workforce and getting younger people involved and starting their careers. That's how it
Yeah,
starts. So
yeah.
that's going to have to change. You can't just not do that as an entry level type thing. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Volunteer. I mean, even without that current restriction, volunteering is becoming more and more important just because more and more people are enjoying the outdoors, and we're not necessarily getting more and more in our budget or more employees. It's not really keeping up with the pace of how many people are out there doing this or that. So yes, volunteering across to everything that we have going on in our culture is going to become more and more important. That's great. And who doesn't want to volunteer on the forest? I mean, it's not like it's very fulfilling. There's a lot of people that really use these places or do this or that, and so it's definitely like touching on that direct human contact. But just the sheer fact that you get to work and volunteer in the outdoors too is like, I mean, it's great.
Yeah, yeah. And are there any particular groups that you see are really making a big difference out there and getting young people involved and getting more people on the trails?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So, there's a lot of just one-offs where like an individual wants to get involved, and that's fantastic. I can put them on whatever fits their needs, but we have a lot of large groups, even some corporate groups getting involved. So their employees kind of like for a team building exercise, they'll go volunteer out on the forest and go help out with some trail work or something like that. And then we have some really thoughtful groups that we work with. Tread Lightly is one of them,
Yeah.
where they'll take a lot of we have a 4x4 is huge in Utah, especially along some of the Wasatch Front. So it's working with a lot of these user groups that one would think like, what are like they might be kind of harsh, or this group, there's a stereotype towards a certain group. But funny enough, those are some of the groups and clubs that are the most involved trying to change those perceptions by, helping out with this or that, being like, listen, we want to enjoy it. We want to do it respectfully and in the right way. And that's probably one of the most fulfilling parts of it is when they're trying to change public perception, and they're educating their group, and whatever culture they're coming from of use, they're also spreading that education. So it's not just like me interacting with this group, it's that group interacting with thousands of other people, and
Right.
it's like a rock in a pond. It just the ripples out, and it's a huge impact.
Right. And they can self-police themselves too. And that's probably the best way to get other people like them to
Oh
follow
yeah.
the rules instead of having
Uh,
someone in a green suit show up and say you can't do this and give you a ticket, right? Yeah.
yeah, yes. There's the policing, and then there's just like if people see people out working, are like, hey, what are you guys doing? We're like, we're getting involved. What are you doing? And then boom, it clicks in for them. Like, oh, I don't know if this is right, but I kind of call it the shame factor. It's like, oh man, look at them. They're a 4x4 group or a mountain bike club. Doing this, and they're doing all this great work. We should probably do the same thing too, instead of just why not incorporate that into our program as well? So
That's
for sure,
amazing.
it's great. Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time. I it allows me, and also the force. It is more flexible than maybe a lot of other jobs as far as like having this whole other art career intermingling with it.
Right.
It's was seasonal for years, which gave me some time off for some larger paintings. But now it's just at the level I'm at, I can kind of gauge my own time and schedule everything in as needed. Because boy, it gets busy at
Sure.
the Forest Service and the full time art. I didn't realize it until maybe just a couple of years ago. It's like I have two full time jobs.
Yeah. I mean,
Not a lot of
and
time.
your art career has really taken off recently, right? You're getting a lot of commissions from the state of Utah. Can you tell us a bit about some of the big commissions you've
Yeah.
gotten recently and stuff yeah.
Oh, I've got some large, and some private collections, and then the state of Utah reached out about a year ago, and we worked out an agreement for a commission for them. and they're really large. They're close to 8 feet, long oil paintings. So they can take upwards of 6 months to a year to finish. And I'll work on other things while the paint's drying here and there in different layers. But yeah, so the past couple of years, I've had some really big commissions, a good group of them, and that's been fantastic. That's kind of allowed me for my art career to kind of take front and center in my life.
Sure.
And then a lot of smaller, and they're not smaller, they're probably what you might call regular size paintings and drawings and different works of art, commissions for various people. So it's been, I'm out of work essentially right now. Like, I'm out of paint. I don't have a stockpile, and that's kind of how the commission for the state came to be. They loved the one piece that I got into this competition for the state, and it did really well, and everybody responded to it very well. And they asked to purchase it. And I said, well, it's actually on loan from the owners to be in this show, but you can commission a piece. And the state of Utah, well, we don't normally commission pieces. And I said, well, I don't have 5 of these sitting on a shelf. They take, close
Right.
to a year to finish. It's, you let me know. And then they reached back out saying, you know what, our board decided to go with it, commission. And so they had to rewrite their contract or this or that to get this huge painting going. And that was great. Let's rock and roll. So, and it's also a little bit, nerve wracking too. It's like I kind of had plan B on the side the whole time because, it's time restraints, and they paid a little bit up front and then the rest on delivery. So it got serious, but
That's great.
I nailed it. Yeah. And they were very happy with it. And in the meantime, I'm also doing smaller commissions for, just anybody who reaches out to me and says, hey, I really like your work. Can you do something like this or that? Or I really like this piece.
Yeah.
I work it out with them.
I bought a painting from you for my wife because I like your
You
work
did?
so much. That's right.
That's
And she loves it. She loves it. A beautiful,
you know about it, yeah.
beautiful painting of a red-tailed hawk, and she says it, it
Yeah.
inspires her all the time. The idea of it rising up on the
That-
thermals and everything. So
That's exactly what it's, people that spend a lot of time in the outdoors, when it really resonates with them, that makes me so, like, that is what it's all about right there. And then they reach out and it's like, absolutely, I can work up some kind of commission or something. And when people, like, it really resonates with them, man, that's what kind of keeps me going.
yeah,
That's not what kind of keeps me going. That's definitely like one of the
sure.
main ingredients for me being happy in this life. So that's great. And I just realized that I was saying that, like, Doug, you just recently commissioned a piece.
I did, yes. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's great to see. I'm a big fan of your art, obviously, and I love to see how it comes out of, as you said, where you grew up out by the road mailboxes in the desert, and the time you spend working for the Forest Service out there. Your art really seems to capture what we see when we're out there. The twisting of juniper roots is how I would describe your work, I think. But and I saw you posted a reel recently on Instagram saying that that's where the art is. You'd have a stick in your hand or something. You're like, the art is out here. This is where it's at, right? So
yeah, for a long time, I would say, like, the paintings and drawings and mixed media work is a side effect of just spending time in the outdoors, and I really try to spend as much time as possible. I'm heading out tomorrow. Like, it's been a really mild winter so far, so I've been able to get out there and hike around without there being too much, without having to strap on the snowshoes or anything like that. But that's where it all comes from. The inspiration. Uh, I'm not reading about it in a book. I'm not dreaming about it. I'm trying to live it as much as possible. In fact, I would probably produce more art if I could, stay away from wandering aimlessly through the desert or any wilderness area too. I kind of fixate on the West Desert and Southern Utah a lot because that's what I know best. It's where I'm from, and that's what really is, like, I consider home. But to a lot of people, it might be, the forest in Montana, or who knows, the Everglades. Everyone has their own special spot. So I really, like, it's all about the wild spaces where you can find them.
I love that.
For me, it's the lichen on the gray slate out there. It's the juniper roots. That's my go-to spot.
And why does art matter, especially in our current times?
Oh. Well, that's a really good question. Why does art matter in these current times? I think art has been one of the most single important things we can do throughout human history, let alone now. There's more confusion out there than ever. Uh, AI, politically, all these different wars, all this or that. And it seems more and more we're just kind of locking ourselves into our apartments or homes and just kind of, well, we are set to work on this system. We're not robots. We're not pre-programmed. We're of this earth, and art is the most breakaway, liberating, free thing we can do. It is our imagination, and if there's anything humans have, probably more than anything else, at least that we know of in the universe, it's imagination. That right there is gonna, break the daily grind. I mean, I'm gonna run to this shop, go to work, go to Starbucks, go sit in my apartment, buy this, buy that. We always have, our escape.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
need to remember that. Yeah. I mean, what, what's life without art? And art is a broad term. I mean, we're talking music, literature, paintings, poetry, you name it. Any kind of like that taps into our psyche and our imagination like that is what makes us us.
Yeah, and you find it, I think, and for you, you find it out there in the wild, right? I remember hearing a interview with Bjork once where she said she composed songs just hiking up onto the top of a mountain and wandering
Oh, for
around.
sure.
Wordsworth
You
did
know,
the same with poems, right? Wandered around and wrote
Absolutely.
poems.
I think the great thing about like the West Desert and Utah, southern Utah as a whole, the Great Basin, Colorado Plateau, is when you're out there. Obviously it drastically cuts down on all that confusion that I just talked about, and it doesn't it definitely forces you to look inner. You are out there. There's not a lot of noise. You are there with your own thoughts right there. And what do you have? Your imagination. And then you really start to notice everything, and you really tap into that. And you're like, and you start to probably rewire and definitely re-engage with some of those synapses that are just on autopilot or not being engaged with at all in our, daily grind. That's what's so important about wilderness right there. It's like I compare it to having a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper to a painting or a drawing. What are you going to do if you don't have that base, somewhere to start from, somewhere to remind you, you know what we branch off from, what we have to work with. I mean, can you imagine a world where we just don't have any wild space at all? I mean, the wild space we have is a park in the back of a mall or something like that. That's hell. That is what I would consider to be hell to
Yeah,
me right
yeah,
there. Uh, I don't think we're going to get. I'm hopeful. I don't think we're going to get there. I think before it gets to that point, people are going to be like, "Whoa, there's going to be a huge breakdown or something happening before we get quite to that point right there." But it could get worse before it gets better. I don't know. I'd like to think not. I'm trying to fight that. Get people engaged with the outdoors. This commission piece that I just did for the state. It's in a a huge, beautiful office building, but like office building. People
right,
are going there to do office stuff, to
right,
work in
right.
that capacity. And I think it's great that now they have this huge sliver of Utah wilderness staring them in the face every day.
That's
Everyone that
fantastic.
comes through that building, yeah, that's that's my protest. That's my way to educate. That's my voice right there. And it people while they were doing the install were stopping. Like, what's going on here? It was already shocking to them. It's in such contrast. I thought this is the best place for it. This is where it's going to do the most work is, engaging with people that are probably overworked, and it's in the middle of downtown Salt Lake City, you know, it's mixing it up a little bit, and a lot of people that normally wouldn't think or see those kind of things right there are going to see it all the time.
I love
So watch
that.
out.
I really like what you were saying before, though, about about it being hell if we don't have these wild spaces. That there really are connected to, without the ability to escape the algorithms, even more so now, right? And society and everything else. Without these spaces where we can think clearly, we kind of lose something of the human in ourselves, right?
Absolutely. I mean, well, Stegner's wilderness letter, probably sums it up the best right there. Is we need these wild spaces. It reminds us that we are human.
I like that.
and allows us to engage with that. We would be lost if we didn't have that, you know, home plate to start with right there. Where would home even be? Where would be where we came from if we didn't have any of these wild spaces? We wouldn't know. We'd just be floating, cut off from, who we are. That's a good way to put it. We'd be cut off from who we are
Hmm.
as humans without those spaces.
I love what you said in a recent, and by the way, Cody does some really great, you have a great social feed as well. A lot of good stuff on there, art itself, I think, in some of your posts. But in
Yeah.
a recent post, you said, like a coyote that is always hungry and never satisfied, I long for a desert with no end. What do you find in the desert? What is it that it's out there that's so important? How can we keep it that way?
I find my life source. Everything is to be found out there. Like we talked about before, it's the main draw for my inspiration. That's my connection to wilderness. Um, and how we can protect it. I wish there was this one single way I could say right now, this is exactly what we need to do to protect it. But just the word protect differs from person to person so much in all these different ways. So I think the best way we can do it is exactly what we're doing right now. You're engaging with people that want to protect in a fashion that you think aligns with your values, and you're connecting with me. I'm connecting with you. We'll connect with listeners. I do my artwork so I can connect and give that message of learning to live with our ecosystem, not owning it so much, but learning to live with it in a sustainable fashion. And that's obviously going to change with, our cultural values and population size and everything else. But of course, it's going to change. It's like everything else, it's always in motion. And we've got to educate others probably more than anything else and keep up the good fight. It's exhausting sometimes
Yeah.
to go over some of these same issues. I listen to the news and it blows my mind that they're talking about some of the same things that 20 years ago, it might as well just be the same thing, when they're speaking to environmental issues.
Yeah.
But that's what we need, just that repetition, dive in, roll up the sleeves, and you're going to feel better fighting for these wild spaces than just not doing anything, even as hard as that fight might be. That's what I found myself.
Yeah, and it seems, there's going to be even more and more pressure on wildlands, right, for them to be developed, for them to be sold off, all these dangers. So
Yeah.
when you're working with all these volunteer groups, do you feel that there will be, an upsurge against that kind of thing, that so many people realize that these places are precious and could be lost? And does that connection, really getting their hands dirty in them, does that help them want to keep them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're out there because they want to keep them usually already, and they realize they need to engage probably, or they want to engage to help out. Um, I think that it's always going to be a balancing act, and this isn't a fight that's ever going to be won. And good, we have wild spaces now. We can all relax and enjoy the outdoors and live our lives. I don't think it's going to work out that way.
Right.
I think this is a fight um, that we have to work out as a culture, as a society, different countries, and find that fine balance and just keep within those parameters the best we can. And that requires you to be doing exactly what you're doing, me to be doing, and others to do more.
I think one thing you see a lot in your art is a connection to ancient cultures, right? Ancient cultures who lived on
Right.
this land, and we get an appreciation of that, as well as the indigenous people, who still lay claim to this land, who it was taken from them in most cases. Um, how can you respect that in the artwork you're doing and when we visit these places?
When I capture any kind of aspects of that in my artwork, which lately there's been a lot of rock art in some of these commissions, I don't own any of that for myself. I try to explain where that was in a very respectful fashion, um, of maybe what culture that was, and I'm never giving away locations or anything like
Right.
that to any sensitive cultural sites. And I mean, if I'm out there hiking around, the West Desert or Southern Utah, how could you not engage with this?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
there's signs everywhere of past civilizations and current civilizations. right there. So, it's not like something I could just not engage with at all. And certainly, I'm not. I'm fully aware of appropriating anything. Any kind of that. I don't. I try my best to do that. I have a background in archaeology,
Right.
so I do have some expertise with how to, respectfully be in these places or not be in them, because everyone isn't welcome everywhere. That's also something some people might think so. I certainly don't. I mean, I want to know where I'm going, who that might affect, who is living in the area, and the history of the area. I try not to go traipsing around blindly without any respect to others. I want to take in all these factors, and most of the time I'll probably agree with what I should do or shouldn't do, or other people think I should do.
I saw in one of your reels, you did something that I thought was really powerful, and I found it really powerful to do myself. Was you showed a arrowhead and you drew it, and then you said you were gonna, put it back. And I've experienced that
Yeah,
too. When I found these, when I first found these things, you want to keep them, and then you realize that there's so much more power to leaving them in that place. But it's a hard thing to teach
absolutely.
people to
I
do.
guess it is. I guess you know what? It is hard. And so, did you notice how I drew the half that was
Yeah,
missing,
yeah,
or tried to?
yeah.
I guess that was my way of being selfish, because I didn't leave the drawing. So, it's that old saying, take a photo, or I take, video photo, this or that, in a respectful fashion, and not to give away locations or to damage anything, or unreasonably disturb anything. But oh yeah, like I drew that. It was such a cool
Yeah,
piece that I'm
yeah.
like, oh yeah, this is unique. I'm drawing, like, you know, we've got to I've got to at least draw this. And the sun was setting. I'm out in the desert. Kick back, draw it, enjoy it, and leave it. What am I going to do with it? What we all have this need. It's a fundamental need that when a lot of people get to the desert, they want to just grasp it, take anything, grab a rock, grab a juniper. People are decorating their front yards with these junipers and stuff like that. That's fine and dandy for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, however long that person's alive. But people, including myself, really need to start thinking like long term. What is that? That's going to be, somebody's going to bulldoze over that, or your collection of whatever you've been taking is going to be lost to, so it might go to a couple grandkids here and there. Eventually this is going to end up, in a cardboard box, probably going right back to the state or somewhere, going like, I don't know what to do with this stuff,
Right.
lost, or a fire or something like that, where, in hindsight, you're like, man, I should have just left that. It would still be sitting right there, just in context, fine as can be. And that's just something I always have to remind myself right there. Like, what am I going to do with it? I'm not going to be here for that much longer. My art is what I'm trying to, take and make live forever. And all I have to do is see or be exposed or hear about some of these things, and I can transfer that right to something that doesn't disturb the outdoors.
I think you transform.
It's hard
When I
sometimes.
look at your art, you really transform. One of the things I like about your artwork is how you really meld and transforms things together. Wildlife, trees, the sky, even. You get that motion of everything working together in some of the pieces I like best of yours. So
It's the ceaseless movement of the desert. I think one of my favorite Edward Abbey lines is like everything changes, everything's in motion. Something about 700 tumbleweeds blown over the edge. I'll be back before you know it.
that's great.
Yeah, it stuck with me. Um, and even the artwork. It's sure the paintings might be around for 1,000 years. I don't know how long, but people are inspired and they're educated by a lot of my work, and then they're going to pass that along to other people. And again, it's that rock in the pond theory of, like, it's not even about the artwork itself in the end. It's about the experiences and people passing that from person to person, and it grows exponentially, way beyond, and it's infinite as long as people are around. And I've already started some kind of conversation initially. It grows
Love it.
a little. Might be hard to notice. It's not going to happen in our lifetime, but whatever. Tumbleweeds over the edge.
Do you think a lot of in time that way, of when you're looking at ancient sites and thinking about how your art may continue or not continue, or how we as people in society
For
might
sure.
continue or not continue?
That's one of the best, most fascinating parts about, seeing a projectile point or a pueblo or cliff dwelling or any of these places. Like, wow, there was, I mean, sometimes when I'm out there, I just think of people's experiences, in prehistory. There was somebody who probably stood right here 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 500 years ago, all throughout time, stood right here and looked at the same sunset that I'm looking at right now, and they grew up here. Their parents probably died right over there, or their kids were born right over there, and that's just nothing but light in the sky now. And that's everywhere all around us, especially out here in the West. And if people just like appreciated that, you don't even need to find any kind of artifact or something. It's everywhere. Everywhere somebody could stand, I guarantee somebody's been out there and looked at, and felt that same feeling that you're feeling right there. And that connection throughout time right there, and the the feeling of loss, but also that connection mixed together. Again, that's a very human, you know, that's what keeps me fighting, is the goosebumps that forms for some people. That is, I think, why I'm here, or at least I'm going to make it why I'm here.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I feel that in the West quite often, that feeling of both loss and permanence at the same time, right?
Right.
How is being out there so much? How has the desert changed you the more time you spend out there?
Oh, just listen to me ramble on. It's obviously had a great effect, and then like, being raised out there, more or less, in the sage and junipers and everything like that. I think through my formative years really kind of planted the seeds of conservation and being inspired by these places. And I rely on them now. I've tried to move other places, earlier in life and do other things. It didn't work out. I have to be, within driving distance to my bug out spots to keep semi sane or semi crazy, and it it fuels the artwork. I've made it. I don't know how I could extract it from my life at this point. I don't think it'd be possible.
Are there any recent, epiphanies or some of those moments you've had out there that are just where you get the feels, where you get the goosebumps, you get the spiritual connection?
There's a lot of them. Let me try to pull. I mean, I just recently revisited some of my favorite junipers. There's all these flowing dunes out, in this particular spot in the West. I mean, flowing dunes. It's over 70 miles of just rolling sand dunes. And then you get up on these little desert mountains with these rock pinnacles and stuff, and then you have these just probably ancient junipers. I don't know, probably 600 to 1,000 years old, 600 to 1,000 years, spiraling out of these weird little. And they're all very unique because the conditions out there are so harsh. I mean, there's sand and there's rock and sunlight.
Right.
That's about it, and they have to make do. And the sand's always moving. And over time, that the dunes passing through or under them and stuff, really, they've adapted with it, but they're not quite as fast as the sand moves. So it leaves them in these unusual positions, And I swear, they look like they're in a state of longing. They're like reaching for the sky. They're trying to say something. It's like being in an ancient, like, sculpture garden, and just being up there on those, and then looking down at the sand and seeing like porcupine tracks. And I'm already in awe because I'm taking pictures of these trees. I'm in my happy place. And then I look down and there's a coyote watching. Boom. It's like I felt like myself watching myself. It was great. And he was just watching me. He was like, "What is this weirdo doing?" But we had a moment. And that was probably one of the last, like, and that was only 4, 5, 6 days ago. But that was probably, that stood out. It's like, yeah, he knows. He knows something.
That's amazing. Looking into the future, as someone who both works in policy and works in the imagination, how do you think we can move forward and ensure that people in wilderness can kind of exist together?
Well, I love that you said like policy right there, because that's what a lot of, and I'm guilty of this, artist type people are in their heads. They're dreaming a lot. They have like, I want to do this or do that, and people should, but when it comes down to it, it is changing policy. It is, legislators and, state laws, federal laws, voting, engaging, becoming an activist, an attorney, all these other jobs that might pull you away from constantly doing your artwork or, living in the wilderness and enjoying it, is fundamental, to these positive changes and this cultural shift. I think we need to do. We need to do the boring, hard work of policy, education, going into these different jobs that we can shape and sculpt, and educate.
That's fantastic.
I try to do it the most I can within the circle of the Forest Service and representing the U.S. Forestry Service, and then my artwork I can kind of break loose too. And I try not to. It's like I have friends that are not environmentalists by any means, and I call them friends just because I choose to engage with them. Because how are we going to change anybody's minds if we constantly polarize ourselves like, whoa, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican or I'm an environmentalist? I understand there's people with views out there that are horrifying to me, obviously, and they're totally different in mine. But if we just put up this wall and be like, I'm not going to even deal with those people, I don't care if they appreciate my art. I do care. That's where it's going to count the most, is like, yeah, I don't agree with you on this. You definitely don't agree with me on that. But I bet you we can agree on this. I call it like my Utah code switching a little bit. I'm an environmentalist with a cowboy hat. I'm out there for everyone to enjoy, and I'll engage with whatever side, just so we can find some common ground of appreciation. I mean, what else can we do?
Love it. Well, that kind of leads into the final question that I kind of ask everyone on this podcast. Is pretty simple. It is just what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? Just yesterday, a friend reached out to me. They are an architect teaching at the University of Utah a design course. And they said, hey, we're going to have some final project presentations for this fundamental design class. And I would really like to get like an artist's point of view on things, and he invited a couple other architects. And then I guess I was the painter that was going to give my input. And we were talking to groups, and this lasted for about 2 hours of two students for about a half hour at a time, and going over and listening to about of what their project was. And there were all these sculptural pieces, but of course I was like, yeah, schoolwork's fine. What do you want to do in life? What do you want to do? And we started talking about art, and all their like they want to be architects, designers, this or that. And I kept noticing like, oh, these kids they're happy, and they're like really doing some awesome like experimental work right now. Things that like I re-engaged me. It's like I need to get back to some of the fundamentals. This is great stuff. Don't fall into a pattern where you're just doing the same thing over and over again. Re-engaging with that. But the hope that I got was just in their faces. I was like, they're not like as bummed out about politics or the environment as I am. That's for sure. And they're up and coming. That's great. And it's like, oh, this is a cycle. This is if life's hard, we can get burned out all we want, Doug. you know, but there are future generations that are, prepared to take up the torch.
Yeah.
And and I guess I felt like some kind of creative vampire, because like, wow, I'll be positive too. Let me feed off of some of this. This is great. And I walked away from that feeling better than I have, definitely than listening to the news or keeping informed or this or that. I was like, holy smokes, this was like this was the front line coming up. And they're passionate about what they're doing, and they're very artistic and talented, students. Rock and roll. We're not in this alone, and it's not the end.
Love it. Love it. Well, Cody, I want to thank you so much for joining me and talking. And before we go, though, I'd like you to let people. I know I'm a big fan of your work, and obviously have bought some of it. I'd like you to let our listeners know how they can see and then possibly commission or buy some of your work.
So, again, it's most people just finding my stuff online through like social media, Facebook or Instagram or my website. You can usually just Google Cody Rex Chamberlain art. A website will pop up. You can find me on Instagram at Cody __ Chamberlain art, something along those lines. And then people will just scroll through my work and send me a message saying, hey, I don't know how to, buy your work, but I really like this piece. And then we start a conversation. We can take it from there. So figure out what's right for them.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Cody.
Hey, thank you, Doug.
Thanks for imbibing Open Container, production of Rockfight LLC. Please take a second to follow our show on whatever podcast app you're listening to, and send your emails and feedback to myrockfight@gmail.com. Our producers today were David Karstad and Colin True. Art direction provided by Sarah Gensert. I'm Doug Schnitzbahn. Get some. Thanks for listening.